Chapter 11. Unseen Sparks. The hum of anticipation filled the air, threading through hallways and classrooms like a silent whisper, touching only those attuned to it. The atmosphere was charged, humming with the undercurrent of something both unseen and unknown, waiting to be revealed. For Lucas, the sensation had become unsettlingly familiar, a quiet buzz, almost like static in his mind, that stirred whenever his powers surfaced. And lately, they had surfaced more than ever, flickering out when he least expected it. Since meeting Thomas, it was as though a faint barrier had gone up, dampening his abilities in ways he couldn't quite explain. In Thomas's presence, his thoughts felt clearer, his powers more controlled, almost as if his friend acted like a grounding wire. But outside of that bubble of calm, Lucas's abilities were becoming harder to contain. Mina, on the other hand, felt it too, though she was less certain of what it meant. There was an energy within her, like a simmering heat ready to burst that she'd felt since she was young. But recently it was intensifying, pushing her beyond the limits she'd known. Every so often she'd catch herself moving with impossible speed, or feel a sudden jolt of energy coursing through her, sharp as a live wire. And while she kept these incidents to herself, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were connected to something, or someone. The first clue came one afternoon, when Lucas and Mina crossed paths between classes. They'd always shared an unspoken connection, but today it felt different, charged, almost magnetic. Lucas was about to nod in passing, but something stopped him, a feeling pulling him closer. "Hey," he said, and the words seemed to hang in the air, infused with more than its simple meaning. "Hey," she replied, her gaze lingering on him, a hint of understanding flickering in her eyes. They fell into step together, but every step felt loaded, like walking on the edge of something dangerous and exhilarating. A few moments later, they reached a doorway, and as Lucas reached out to open it, the door seemed to swing back on its own, as if moved by an invisible force. He blinked, momentarily thrown off, while Mina's eyes widened slightly before she looked away, pretending not to notice. They stepped inside, sharing a brief, knowing glance. Later, as they settled into the library, Mina had every intention of focusing on her studies. She could feel the weight of Lucas's gaze from across the table, though, a faint electricity that sharpened her focus and yet scattered her thoughts all at once. Sitting there in the quiet, she decided to edge the conversation closer to her suspicions, just enough to see how he might respond. "So," she started, her voice soft but probing, "you ever feel like there's something bigger going on with you? Something under the surface?" Lucas stilled, caught off guard. He'd had similar questions swimming in his head for weeks now, but Mina's question took him by surprise. Could she know? "It's crossed my mind," he replied, attempting to sound casual while holding her gaze. At this moment, he thought, wait, does she think I'm in love with her, or about my powers, or both? Everyone feels that way sometimes, don't they? Mina's eyes narrowed just slightly, as though she sensed the caution in his response. "Yeah, maybe," she said, leaning back. But something in her expression lingered, and it left Lucas feeling exposed. After a few more veiled questions and polite nods, she excused herself, feeling a strange unease growing within her. Maybe he was hiding something, she thought as she walked away, her mind racing back to every glance, every strange sensation she'd felt in his presence lately. Without really thinking about it, Mina found herself drifting toward the tracks. A few other students passed by in small clusters, but no one lingered long enough to notice her. The open field and quiet hum of the place soothed her in a way she desperately needed, and she began a slow jog, focusing on the steady rhythm of her steps. But her mind kept returning to Lucas, the way the door had moved, the subtle tension in their brief conversation, the energy she'd felt sitting across from him. Her suspicions were only growing stronger. Frustrated and fueled by a sense of urgency, Mina pushed herself faster, her feet pounding against the track. She felt the surge of energy building, filling her chest, her limbs, until it was nearly blinding. And then, without warning, she burst forward with a speed that defied reason, crossing half the track in the blink of an eye. She stumbled, barely catching herself before falling, her pulse racing. Heart hammering, she slowed, looking around in shock. Her mind reeled. She'd known her speed was increasing, but never to this extent. This was different. This was impossible. A few other students were nearby, but no one seemed to have noticed the strange burst of movement. With her heart still pounding, Mina straightened up, her mind swirling with questions. She thought about Lucas again, the strange sensation she'd felt between them. Whatever was happening, she was sure of one thing: it wasn't just her.